Hey everybody, just a quick snapshot video on business objectives, revenue maximization. So again, our starting point is output against cost, revenue and price, and we follow that up with our average revenue and demand curve and twice as steep marginal revenue curve. Then we put in our average cost curve and our marginal cost curve, which again must cross the average cost curve at the lowest possible point. Now, once we have this, we have to identify the production point for revenue maximization, which in this case is where MR is equal to 0. So this is the revenue maximization production point, which we're going to have to use in order to identify an equilibrium in the diagram. So we've got to think about why this is. Why is it when MR equals 0, we are maximizing revenue? Well, you've got to go back to some of the foundation work that you did when looking at revenue diagrams in year one. Now, what you see on the board now is a total revenue diagram where you have a graph of revenue on the y-axis against output on the x-axis. Now, that total revenue, as you can see, is starting to increase, and then it gets to a maximum point and then starts to decrease. Now, at the peak of this graph, clearly you are maximizing your total revenue. Now, in terms of marginal revenue, well, when we draw the marginal revenue curve on this same diagram, what you establish is a clear pattern, and that is that the marginal revenue, when it's at 0 or when it cuts the x-axis at 0, at that same point in time, the total revenue is at its maximum point, as you can see from the pink equilibrium going back up to the total revenue curve. And that's why when MR equals 0, total revenue is at its maximum point. Now, if you don't understand that entirely, what you'll need to do is go back over and review your revenue work from year one. So just go back and plot some graphs on total revenue, marginal revenue, and average revenues, and you hopefully will remember the relationships between those three curves. Going back to our business diagram, we can now identify where MR equals 0, we can establish an equilibrium. Now, that's already on the x-axis, so you can identify Q quite easily. You take it always up to your demand curve to establish the price, and this gives us a price of P, which is the price you would have to charge in order to revenue maximize. And again, P times Q gives you the total revenue if you need it. Once you've established that, you can, if you wish, highlight the profits generated from revenue maximization, and that you do that in a similar way to profit maximization. You just got to go up to the cost curve, take it across, and highlight C. Now remember, this is not a profit maximization diagram, so therefore you will be making less supernormal profits. The idea here, though, is to identify the purpose of revenue maximization, which occurs where MR equals 0. So when you revenue maximize, you are sacrificing some profits if you were instead doing profit maximization, because that's the maximum profits you could make. So why do revenue maximization? Well, it's to do with being able to sell more units, being able to increase the prestige of a company, managers being able to ask for higher wages when they know they have generated a lot of revenue for the firm. So there is an element of divorce of ownership from control when you're looking at this theory, because different stakeholders, like managers, will have different objectives. So if they increase the level of revenue for the business, they can demand higher wages and probably get paid them as well by the owners. So there is some conflict in this objective, and you can talk about that in evaluation. Finally, with efficiency, we're just saying here that you have no allocative efficiency in this diagram, no productive efficiency, no X efficiency, possibly some dynamic efficiency depending on how the businesses choose to spend their profit. And as you can see, I've highlighted in green the corners of the equilibrium where P, X, Y, C highlight the supernormal profit being made when this organization is revenue maximizing. Hope that's helpful.